If you want to validate someone's emotions, not invalidating them is a great place to start. In this video, I'm going to help you avoid falling into the invalidation trap so your well-meaning efforts actually land the way you intend. So let's talk about what invalidation actually looks like, because most of it doesn't look like cruelty. It looks like trying to be caring. And that's exactly why this mistake is so easy to make. If invalidation is the opposite of validation, let's be clear what we're talking about here. Remember, validation isn't agreeing with someone, and it's not saying you approve of their choices. And it's definitely not saying they're right and you're wrong. Validation is how we meet someone where they are instead of where we wish they were. It's the ultimate show of support and acceptance, even in difficult moments. It helps us step around whatever 400-pound gorilla is in the room and puts the focus on connection instead of winning. This works because it's our way of understanding what's going on with them, their feelings and perceptions, and recognizing that we don't get to choose that for other people. This is more important than you might think because validation upholds two crucial qualities of any successful relationship. First is agency, which is the right each of us has to exert control in our own lives. We can choose our own words, actions, thoughts, and relationships. Even if you don't agree or just don't get it, holding space for them to work it out based on what's going on in their head and heart is the smoothest path forward. You see, it's pretty convenient to preach personal responsibility when you don't agree with someone, but that works both ways. Personal responsibility and agency can't be separated because they both depend on the fact that we get to choose for ourselves. If you invalidate someone's feelings, which is not the same as disagreeing with their ideas, you run the risk of sending the message that they don't choose their internal experience. You want to dictate that to them. Or you run the risk of sending the message that your big feelings are making me uncomfortable. Why don't you do something about that for me, please? If you land in this space, which it may not be your intention, you risk accidentally trying to make someone else responsible for your feelings. As relationship strategies go, that one usually doesn't help. So how can you lean into upholding agency for both of you? You guessed it, by validating, even when you disagree or just can't understand where they're coming from, maybe especially then. Win the argument later. Start by building connection. Second is equity, and I don't mean 50-50 scorekeeping. I mean that both people in the relationship get to show up as full human beings, feelings included. When we invalidate someone's emotions, even accidentally, we're essentially saying, I get to decide what's worth feeling here. Remember the G.I. Jane scene? When I want your opinion, I'll give it to you. Well, invalidation becomes the emotional version of that, and nobody feels connected or valued in that dynamic. Equity keeps both people in the room as equals, even when one person is leading and even when you disagree. That's what makes it feel safe to be honest with each other. Validating helps us secure the relationship and build connection. You don't have to agree to validate, you just have to be curious and open, which is usually a good thing for strengthening relationships. Agency and equity give your relationship a foundation that holds, even when one of you is hurting or you're in conflict. Sometimes we try to validate or support, but we miss the mark. I've seen this countless times, and there are some common mistakes people can make. They're not being jerks. They're just still learning how to show up in the way that they want and the way you need. Here are my top 5 things people say trying to be helpful, but accidentally end up invalidating instead. For each one, I'll give you a way to pivot to a more validating, supportive approach. Once we go through these 5, I think you're going to see where I'm going. To help you apply these ideas, I have a handout you can print and use in your conversations. It'll help you focus on what to say by applying the principles in this video. I've linked the handout in the description, and you can download it for free. The first invalidating thing we say comes in 2 popular forms, either don't cry or calm down. As we all know, the absolute worst way to get someone to calm down is to tell them to calm down. This is because when we're upset, we don't need instructions. We need empathy and acceptance. You may not realize it, but you're putting conditions on your support with those statements. You're telling them that being there for them is contingent on their regulation. Ironically, telling someone to calm down doesn't help them regulate. It's a rejection of who they are. It states the demand that they are supposed to be like you want them to be. So often it takes things from bad to worse. It's the same with don't cry. Is this about their big feelings or more about your discomfort with how they express those? Sure, someone crying can be uncomfortable for the others in the room, but ask yourself if you really want to be helpful or not. Instead of helping them regulate or feel better, don't cry ends up making them responsible for your feelings. So, what can you do instead? If you want to validate instead of invalidating, the task is to create space for those feelings. It's about sending the message your discomfort isn't going to make me so uncomfortable that I reject you. There are several options here, and you'll have to figure out what's best in the situation. But reassurance and curiosity go much further than instructions. Take all the time you need. I'm here is one example. When you say this, you remind them they're not on a clock and your support does not depend on their regulation. Sitting quietly and just giving them time and space to be in those feelings is another option. Sometimes we forget that just being quiet and present is far more helpful than people realize. Are these options always on the table? Of course not. Sometimes the other person is pointing their dysregulation at you in a way you just can't accept, so you need to set a boundary. There are ways to do that, though, without invalidating the other person. Or maybe you just really don't have time right now. This is where something like, I really want to be here for you on this, but I cannot be late for work. Can we talk about this after I get off? It sets a structure, but doesn't reject the feeling. In the end, the filter is how can I be present and hold space for this person where and how they are, instead of how I want them to be. Invalidating statement number 2 is I know exactly how you feel. Now, this looks like empathy, right? You're talking about how they feel. But is it really? I know how you feel may not land as empathetic as you think. Remember, empathy is curiosity based, not knowledge based. If you want them to feel understood, telling them what you know about them just defines them in ways that often doesn't feel good. But what if you're right about how they feel? What if you do know exactly how they feel? Well, two things here. First, let's take a hypothetical example. A friend who just lost a relationship and is sad and hurt. And you say, I know exactly how you feel. Well, that closes the loop. What are they supposed to say to that? By defining your knowledge about their internal state, you put them in a corner. But if you ask how that feels for them and they say, I'm sad and hurt, then you're both in a better position. They feel that autonomy of naming their own feelings, and they feel the support inherent in being asked to share those honestly. It puts you in a better position too because it gives you a chance to double down on curiosity. What else do you want to tell me? How can I support you? If you just say, I know, then you've walled yourself off from the extended conversation. Even though they may say the exact same thing, being asked instead of told just lands differently. Mind reading and good guessing doesn't help someone feel seen and heard. Listening does. And second, saying you know exactly how they feel is just a short distance from moving the conversation to something in your story that felt the same to you. When you personalize their story, you undermine theirs and miss the opportunity to be present for them. Anyone who's tried to talk to someone only to have them turn it into a conversation about their story, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So again, empathy relies on curiosity, something along the lines of, God, that sounds hard. Would you be willing to tell me more about that? We affirm that this is their story and we're here for it. We don't need to make it our own. The third invalidating statement is just stay positive. What's wrong with staying positive? Being negative doesn't help, right? This can be very well meaning, but it also smacks of toxic positivity. If someone lost their job and their dog died and they caught their roommate with their girlfriend all on the same day, sorry, that sucks. How are they supposed to stay positive about that? If someone is truly hurting, telling them to stay positive is just like putting lipstick on a pig. Even if you don't mean to, you end up telling them that their sadness is not valid. We're trying to validate here, so acknowledging their sadness as a natural response to what's going on can be a much more helpful move. What if they're just being dramatic and it's not really such a big deal in your book? Well, that's your book, and those would be your feelings. Like we talked about, affirming that their feelings are theirs and they have a right to feel them is far more supportive. If you send the message, I don't think I'd be so upset by this, the best case scenario is that you've just told them that you're more resilient than they are. That's not supportive. Honest acknowledgement of their feelings goes much further to helping someone feel supported. Something like, You don't have to put a good face on this right now. That sends a message that their discomfort is something you can tolerate. That kind of acceptance is what helps people heal. Statement number 4 is other people have it worse. This may be true, and your intention may be to help them develop gratitude. But pain isn't a contest, and it's not pie. Just because someone else has more of it doesn't mean that yours doesn't matter. The point here is to hold space in a way that says your pain doesn't need a comparison to be real. You can remind them that they don't need anyone's permission to feel how they feel. Just remember 2 things here. First, it's not a contest. There are many reasons something may land hard for someone. And second, it's not for one person to decide what's meaningful to someone else. Again, you don't have to agree or understand it to validate it. Validating emotions you don't understand is actually a pretty strong flex in supporting your partner. It helps you send the message that you're in even when they struggle. Statement number 5 that invalidates is it's not so bad. Even if you're not comparing to others like we just discussed, this steps into the realm of rating someone else's feelings. You end up making yourself the arbiter of someone else's emotional experience. Who made you boss? This statement is a variation on telling someone they're overreacting. That's right up there with calm down. Here's the problem. Nothing that happens to any of us occurs in a vacuum. We all have different life experiences, values, struggles, and insecurities. And we all have different levels of resiliency in different situations. So it's not so bad is really saying, this wouldn't be so bad for me. It undermines their feelings and runs the risk of putting yourself above them in the relationship. Oh, there's our old enemy power differential again. You don't have to agree it's a big deal to make room for it being big for someone else. You don't lose anything by saying something like, that's a real loss. I'm sorry you're dealing with that. It's a relational win for you on 2 levels. You avoid minimizing their pain, supporting them where they are, and you send the message that I don't need you to respond to this in the way I would respond to it. Hey, there's our old friends agency and equity again, kicking power differentials ass and building bridges of support in your relationship based on respect and empathy. If you want a strong relationship, that trumps judgment and power seeking any day of the week. The examples I gave today may look different in your relationship, and you may wonder how you're going to remember all these things to apply these strategies. Don't worry, I've got your back. I've developed a reference you can print and keep with you in those serious moments and conversations. If you find yourself not knowing what to say, this reference will help you make some critical choices in the moment to show up in supportive and empathetic ways. If your heart's in the right place, but the words fail you, this free handout may help. The link is in the description below. If this kind of work resonates with you, I'd love to have you join me over on my Patreon community. That's where I go deeper on these topics, more handouts, more nuance, more conversation. If you want to keep growing in this space, that link is below. Hey friends, thanks for being here today. And until next time, be well.